Thanks for listening to the Forest Ramble podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review on your podcast provider, as this helps other Forest supporters find our content. Now on with the pod. Welcome to the end of season Forest Ramble podcast. It is a pleasure to be joined for the last time in this season by Mr. Stephen Topless. Hello.
Hello.
And Mr. Maradona of The Midlands. Hello, Mr. The Midlands.
Hello.
So, it's been a very eventful season, but we were just saying before we clicked record that what an odd thing it is to go into the final match of the season yesterday pretty much on the beach. Absolutely nothing to play for. Nice feeling, Stephen?
Yeah, it's nice to have a boring end to the season, if I'm completely honest. Away from the fear of relegation and with a more reflective mood on the season as a whole. Yes, it could have been better, but to go from finishing 17th to 9th in 12 months, that's progress, and it's really not that bad.
Yeah, and the highest position and points finished that Forest have had since, I think, 2013, which coincidentally was the end of the first full season after Fawaz Al-Hassawi bought Forest. So, just saying, correlation is not causation, but just putting it out there. Maradona Midlands, what's your overarching feeling on the season just gone?
Overall, it's hard not to be disappointed. We all had very high hopes going into the season, and even until quite recently. I think back to the day we beat Swansea a few weeks back, and I was pretty confident we could make the playoffs at that stage. So to sort of die away quite so dramatically in the last few weeks, it was a bit disappointing, and it left by the time the last game of the season came around. I think we'd all accepted it, and we could take it in good spirits and just thank our lucky stars that we weren't in Bolton's shoes.
So after the match, I did have a chat with Baz and got his thoughts on what happened in the Bolton game.
Not much of a game, really. Probably 4 chances in the entire 90 minutes. Nothing really exciting happened.
And after the match, Reggie Nottingham was saying, well, it almost feels as though everyone's got so much sympathy for Bolton that Forest couldn't be bothered to actually try and turn them over. Yeah, well, I mean, it was quite noticeable that at the end of the game, the Bolton players came over to applaud their fans, and all our fans stood up and applauded them. Back to the issue at hand in terms of how the season has gone. Stephen, you mentioned the word progress. Maradona the Midlands, you mentioned a bit of disappointment. I did put out a poll on Twitter and saying to Forest fans, how would you summarise this season? 1% went for success, 1% went for disaster. I think it's a bit strong, but anyway. A third of voters went for disappointment and 65% went for progress. Now, to me, actually, I think that sort of 2/3, 1/3 split probably sums up my own personal feelings about the season, because it was going so well and then it did fall away quite dramatically. Stephen, from where you're sat, is the lack of playoff challenge, is that directly attributable to Martin O'Neill taking over as manager?
It is, but only the wider circumstances around that. So losing Aitor Karanka midway through the season and the upheaval that created, and even the month where there was the will he, won't he go saga, that definitely unsettled the team further. And when we had the win against Ipswich at home, and it looked like we were ready to cement ourselves in the top 6, and the results fell away. There was that interview with Karanka post-match where it just seemed like something wasn't right, and to our knowledge, things weren't right behind the scenes after that, and it then culminated in the Norwich game where we thought he was going to go, then he wasn't, and then he was, and then he wasn't again. We beat Leeds at home at New Year, and then the manager does go eventually, and it does create an upheaval, and we as Forest fans know that probably better than any club, that sacking a manager or allowing a manager to go, or just a manager leaving midway through the season, it does destabilise, and it's very difficult to have some continuity off the back of that.
And it's funny that, because I mean the phrase that again on Twitter, so friend of the podcast, Danny Benson, who said, the season was characterised by stasis mixed with spikes of hope. And again, I think that's quite a nice characterisation, because there was that sort of sense of hope. And then there was actually, no matter which manager we're talking about, there was also moments where you kind of going, oh, that's a bit underwhelming. And the global obsession also is overwhelmingly underwhelming. And Christopher sort of says, oh, ups and downs, a bit like a yo-yo. Now, one thing that we are taking the official line here, and this is on the basis of the information that came out of the club, which is not much, on the basis of articles we've read since, and there was a Karanka interview which was quoted in the Evening Post a couple of weeks ago, and also on the basis of the kind of stuff that, your Robin Chipperfields and your Paul Taylors have been putting out. Karanka walked away from the club, okay? And there's absolutely, as far as we're aware, no foundation in saying that he was forced out. Now, obviously, we'll never know for certain. Now, Maradona of the Midlands, you were very positive about the appointment of Martin O'Neill. How do you think it's gone since he's come in?
I don't think it's gone as well as I thought it would. I thought he'd have a real galvanising effect on the squad, sort of a real motivational effect, and just really get them going just for a really hard push. And I just don't think it's happened. There's reasons for that. There's quite a few new players who came into the squad. But there's also reasons that have sort of stretched from the beginning of the season. Really, the same problems we've had all along, which he obviously hasn't been able to solve, which is our lack of creativity at times and lack of goals, injury to Graben, his form going off, and the lack of any sort of suitable replacement for him. And just also he's not helped himself slightly with sort of lots of chopping and changing. I think we're all supporting Martin, but I think it's hard to understand sometimes some of his selections and some of his sort of changes and it's been a bit confusing at times watching as a fan, and I think it's just culminated in a lack of rhythm in the team and a lack of ability to put a run together.
And this is what Baz thought.
Taking 16 games or whatever to get the best measure of this side was far too long. Mm-hmm. I think it's quite obvious. I mean, obviously we're biased, we get to see them a lot, but I think you could ask pretty much any other fan of teams in the Championship who see us twice a season, and they would be able to tell you that this is a side that wants the ball played to feet on the ground. And for Martin O'Neill to have come in and then tried to turn us into basically Leicester City in the 1990s is a failing on his part. And it's quite noticeable that in the last 3 games, when we've been winning, it's not just the change of formation and it's not just playing Carvalho, but the entire style of play is very reminiscent of the way we played under Karanka.
The whole Karanka-O'Neill thing has had a very polarising effect on the fan base. Now, Stephen, you wrote a piece for the blog on our site where you were commenting about how basically it's one or the other. You are black or white. There are no shades of grey. And I think this is potentially being probably more damaging to the club than what's been going on the pitch, or what hasn't been going on the pitch in that time. Is there anything that you want to sort of add to that?
Yeah, it's been damaging because there are groups of people out there who are anti-O'Neill and don't seem to be brought round in any way to any positive argument for him. Even with the performances against Middlesbrough, much improved, better football and a good win. It's just basically giving them vindication to say, well, we should have played Carvalho before this. Carvalho is back in the team and now look what he's doing, and why didn't Martin see that before?
That's fair comment, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
you put your most creative player in the team, and he comes on against Hull and we win 3-0. He plays against Borough, we win 3. He's been in the team for 3 matches at the end of the season where we've won them.
But to counter that, he was also in the Villa team. We didn't really create anything, and then he was also in the team in November, December, and January when we hardly scored a goal. I've got a list of games here: Stoke at home, Preston at home, Derby away, QPR at home, Millwall away. Just lots of games where we didn't score a goal and we weren't creating much.
Okay.
And
Now, obviously,
I mean, people with rose-tinted glasses will say we've not been creating much recently because Carvalho's not been in the team, but we weren't creating much often when he was in the team. And we spoke in this podcast about how we're delighted when he gets the ball and he creates something, but he needs to do a lot more. He doesn't dominate games and he doesn't influence games enough. And Marston probably saw that and was probably trying to coach that into him, trying to maybe give him a little bit of a rest and trying to get more out of him. So I can understand why he's done it. It's a risky manoeuvre when you're not winning, and it could very easily be interpreted as Martin O'Neill being stubborn and showing the fans, well, I'll show you. You don't pick the team, I do. I'm not sure if he's that influenced by social media and Twitter campaigns.
I suspect he probably doesn't look.
And so he's probably just wanted to try different things. And I think the thing with Carvalho is he's an edge of the box type of player. So he comes alive around the 18-yard box. He's not the sort of player that we've really been missing, which somebody who can control the middle of midfield, pick a pass out, play people through from the halfway line, maybe carry the ball 20, 30 yards and lay it off. And it's just not just one player's job. This is the whole team as a whole hasn't passed it well all season. It started probably the second home game, or even the first home game against West Brom. For me, the first three games of the season, summer post-season, really well. Bristol City away, we played really well, didn't take our chances, had to set off for a point. West Brom came out, lots of optimism, played really, really well for an hour, then started giving the ball away, tired, fell away a bit, and ended up with a draw, didn't get the points we deserved. And then the Reading game was sort of more indicative of the sort of season we were going to have, where we really struggled to break down the team. And for that, thankfully, that day we did manage to break them down and get the goal. But those three games will really encapsulate the season for me.
And doesn't that just prove that it's a tough division?
Yeah, it does. It shows it's a tough division, and it shows that the problems haven't started just under Martin O'Neill. No. They've been there a long time, all season. I mean, credit to the team and the players. We improved a lot from last season. We've from 9 places, 8 places. We were 13 points better off. We scored 10 more goals and conceded 7 less. So that's real improvement. But we're going to have to do that again. That sort of level of improvement just to get to the playoffs. And then if we want to get sort of automatic promotion, we're talking about a good sort of 20 more points that we're going to need, 24 points, which we're going to have to sort of get some major changes in. I'm not sure if we can...
Okay, I mean, going back to the subject of Carvalho, again, this is what Baz had said.
So one of the things I have been listening out very carefully to what Martin O'Neill's been saying about Carvalho over the time he's been here. And you can tell that O'Neill likes him. Mm-hmm. And he's very protective of him. Even when he wasn't getting in the side and he was constantly being asked about it, I think he was very protective of Carvalho. That changed towards the end of the season, and he started saying he's one of those players you have to build the side around. And then on the Borough game, he basically built the side around him, and that's when everything seemed to change. So I think, yeah, it is. That's his opinion is we're going to play passing when Carvalho's in the side. What will be interesting next season is what we play on the games when Carvalho isn't in the side.
And I mean, it's a debate that we had many times in that first half of the season in a number of the podcasts, which is, you know, João Carvalho should be the beating heart of the Nottingham Forest team. Discuss. And I say absolutely. The great thing about Carvalho isn't just what he does as an individual, but the fact that his work also, and this has been noticeable, creates a space for the Joe Lollies and Matty Cashes of this world to be able to play to their strengths as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, I do think that building the side around Carvalho this season would have been problematic to some extent. simply because, you can tell that he's still finding his feet in the Championship. He's still getting used to the physicality.
But
of
not
it.
enough to miss nearly half the season on the bench, surely.
But and he's only 21. But spending half the season out is too much. But when Martin O'Neill kept on saying, yes, but you've got to remember that he wasn't in the side when I came here. He was only not in the side for 2 games or something.
That was a straw man argument, wasn't it? Karanka very, very quickly got the players he wanted and got them playing in a style that he wanted. He was very single-minded in that. As we discussed, O'Neill, it took him a long time to decide how to get the best out of his players. And of course, he was faced with the defensive injury crisis, for example. I actually think that whole idea of playing 3 at the back, I'm surprised it took him so long to do that, because to me, bearing in mind that O'Neill clearly wants to shore up the midfield, and he clearly, he's making noises about how he wants to have a little bit of more flair and creativity. I'd have thought 3 at the back would enable him to do so. If you play players like Byram or Cash on the wing back on one side, and Osborne, Robinson could do it, but maybe we could do with another sort of wing back type player. And I think that's a good way of shoring it up, so you can have those 2 screening midfielders and still be able to have a lot of licence to attack going forward. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think we brought that up as long ago as sort of November time when we were struggling to break teams down.
But Karanka only wanted to play 4-2-3.
Yeah. So, I mean, it makes sense. And probably the best exponents of that formation this season have been Sheffield United, who played sort of 3 at the back. And we've taken it on to another level where their central defenders actually bomb on forwards and overlap the fullback. So it makes sense because it pushes more players up into the creative areas where we've sort of struggled to get players all season, in and around the box and sort of into the attacking third. We tend to play quite deep. I think that's been a frustration of mine just watching Forest this season. We do play really quite deep. And that leaves a lot of room to sort of move up the pitch to create anything. There's a lot of travelling of the ball, a lot of passing to get it forward into the danger areas.
But equally, some of the most exciting matches have been the ones where you start off in a deep position, but then you have that high press. And you mentioned the West Brom match. You mentioned the Leeds match. Leeds match was the reason we steamrolled Leeds at home was from pressing high up. Stephen, what are your thoughts on tactics and formations?
I think the reason that O'Neill didn't play a 3-5-2 earlier is because he was trying to get points basically by sticking to a safe, trusted method. It's a little bit like a team in relegation in that, managers who are in that situation, let's say it's Sam Allardyce, who's known as a firefighter, revert to type of a solid 4-4-2 or a 4-5-1, batten down the hatches and do what you've got to do to get 3 points. And I think there was an element of that with O'Neill, thinking, well, I've got to get points to get into the playoffs, so what's the safest and perhaps easiest way to do that with a bunch of players who I don't fully know in and out right now? And that would probably be a slightly more attritional style with, hard-working midfielders and an emphasis on getting the ball forward quicker. I'm not saying that that's what I wanted to see or it's anything that I particularly agree with in a purely footballing sense, but I do understand the logic behind it. And I'm quite pleased now that this 3-5-2 has come about and it seems to suit the players that we've got. And if, let's say, we work on this through pre-season and we look to have that as our main formation for next season, I'd be quite positive that it'll be an effective way forward for us.
And you mentioned about that kind of reverting to type almost as a manager. Isn't there an argument to say that if you're a new manager coming in, whether it be in football or whether it be in many other walks of life, actually the safest thing to do is keep things the same as much as you can?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think he came into a situation where the team was struggling to get results at that point, and he just wanted to sort of stop the rot first and foremost. And it looked like it was working. Let's be fair. After the Derby game, we were all fairly positive. Thought if this is the way it's going to take to get us into the playoffs, we don't mind winning 1-0 every week. It's okay. It doesn't matter. but it's not particularly pretty to look at. It's as long as we've become really hard to beat, and then we can take it from there later on. The problem came because we started leaking goals again for some reason. It just
Now, you talked about being pretty to look at. Theory, question, I'd like to know your thoughts. Actually, you know what? Let's not whitewash it. Things weren't always that rosy under Karanka.
There weren't, no. There was some performances under Karanka where you came away thinking, really enjoy that all that much. That was a bit of a difficult watch. And there were games where we had to grind out wins when it looked like we weren't going to.
Crucially, I can't think of many games where we lost and you thought, yeah, but we played all right.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that was down to Karanka's style as well. And that deep setup which he seemed to favour, and the fact that he went with a 4-2-3-1 with two sitting midfielders. I'm not going to mention anything about stubborn managers because I think we might have done that already a few times, but he didn't want to deviate away from that formation. And if I compare him to O'Neill, I actually think O'Neill is a better reactive manager, as in he can change a game from the bench. He seems to be better at doing that than Karanka ever was. So, yes, for me, there's plus and minuses of both, but definitely I agree with you in that it wasn't all pretty football and Carvalho was tearing up the league and we were flying under Karanka.
I think the highlight for me of the season was the first home game against West Brom, where we just seemed to play with total complete freedom, and it looked like Diaz and Carvalho was going to tear up the division, and it was a bit misleading. But
well, for those of you who are old enough, you may remember Paul Hart's first game in charge against Sheffield United, where it's almost having played a fairly turgid style of play under David Platt, all of a sudden the players just had this real freedom and the energy and there's pace and pressing, and then just like in the West Brom match, they ran out of steam about 10-15 minutes before the end and ended up conceding an equaliser. So, and could have lost it, but we all went away from that with a massive sense of optimism as well.
Yeah, and I think we've not played with that sense of freedom.
Leeds match, maybe?
Leeds at home. No, that's more. We were under a lot of pressure that game. We were hitting them on the break, the second half especially. And Leeds could have easily won that game.
We were second best in that Leeds game for long spells. Yeah. Whereas the West Brom game, we went toe to toe with them, and it was a really good contest.
It was toe to toe. We were just better than them.
It was that the Gadura shot from the halfway line, and it was almost a sliding doors moment. If you could see that going into the goal, we would have won the game, and it would have maybe ticked on and kicked on a bit from there, and just it would have had the confidence to play on. I think just as the season gets going and the struggle for points comes, managers become acutely aware they need to get points on the board, and to do that, they'll always take a point first and start from that basis, and they're always going to be a bit more defensive. That's not necessarily the way to get promoted, but looking at the teams who finish at the top of the league, Norwich have conceded more or less the same number of goals we have, but they've scored a huge amount of goals, 90 odd goals or something, and it's that seems to be looking back at last season as well with Wolves and Fulham, scored a hell of a lot of goals. And that's...
Yeah, you can say the same for Sheffield United. It's all about going forward and
getting goals. Yeah, because it's a 3 points for a win situation where it's a massive advantage. Just get that extra 2 points. It's worth the risk. And a lot of managers will not do that because it's just bred into them that you can't lose. And because once you do lose in the division now, or any in football now, with social media, if you lose a game, it's a disaster. And then everybody's looking at your job. You're only three games away from the sack. If you win a game, you're a genius. We're going to go up. We're going to storm it. There's just no middle ground. It's either we're brilliant or we're terrible.
But isn't that gung-ho attacking attitude what cost Forest 2 points away at Norwich?
Not really. That's just terrible defending. And the thing.
No, it wasn't. It's because they kept trying to go forward and get more goals. They got carried away with being 3-0 up away from home.
I think it's just more. It's more to do with just being unable to just keep possession. It's just the same. I've come back to it again and again this season. We just don't have the players who can pass the ball to each other and keep control. Players like Matty Cash, Joe Lolly, Ben Osborne. I've seen them so many times. They'll get the ball, run 10 yards, and lose it. And it's okay when it works. You can break free and you're attacking and you're away. But just time and time again, we've just lost the ball.
I think crucially, it's important. If that happens in the last third of the pitch, then obviously you've got a bit more of a buffer. And that's why, in a way, I'm surprised that we've not seen more of Jakob, because I think that he's quite good at that kind of thing.
Yeah, and just connect. Just we've had quite a disconnect between the front man and the midfield for most of the season. It's not been slick. There's not been this style of passing football where we sort of pass our way through teams, and it's always sort of a bit of a run from somebody and then maybe a knockdown from somebody. It's not. We've not passed through our way through teams to score lots of pretty goals. It just hasn't happened.
No, we've relied on Lolly too much at times. As great as he is, and fully deserving of the Player of the Season award, there are times where it's just get the ball to Lolly and see what he can do, and there's only so many times you can do that before teams work you out and they double up on him and he's closed out the game. You've got to find that more consistent way of scoring goals, and yeah, you're absolutely right. We've not done that.
I think we've also hurt ourselves by having two defensive midfielders so many times during the season. Martin started doing it as well when he brought in Watson from the cold, and so there's Watson and Colback sitting in there, and they're both pretty much the same sort of player. They break it up, give it short.
Bit racist,
but they're not players that are going to drive you forward. I think Colback's got the ability to do that, and he's got the facets in his.
I don't think it's his natural game.
It's not his natural game, and there's a small part of me hoping that once Roy Keane came in, maybe he could get him to do that. He could maybe coach him into sort of becoming that breakaway player driving.
You don't have that many box-to-box midfielders in that way, do you?
You don't know. No. But I think he's got the stamina to do it. But it's really hurted, I think, having those two defensive players. Even Jakob's not that dissimilar from the two of them.
I think one of the things that I noticed is that when we were playing with Jakob and Colback, though, it did free up Colback to do a bit more of the kind of the carrying while Jakob was doing the destroying.
Yeah.
And that's something that you don't necessarily get that different dynamic if you've got a Watson and Colback there, or even a Yates and a Colback there.
And it makes it really confusing to see why Jakob just hasn't featured. When he came in against Sheffield United, he was brilliant. And he's not played again since then. I just don't understand what's happened. I don't know. It is strange. He's that quality player. I go back to the Sheffield United game when Sheffield United were top of the league and they came to City Ground. I think it was November time, and that team had Jakob made his debut. I think it was, and it was Jakob and Gadjura in the central midfield, and Dawson was in centre back position. And I just thought nobody's going to beat us this season if these three players play. We're just not going to lose because they just had so much know-how, so much ability to stop.
Yeah, the experience was oozing out of that team,
and they were just controlling it.
And that's what, for all that I think we all agree that we really like Sheffield United and the way they've gone about things this season. Yeah. And their style of play with those marauding centre-halves is unlike anything I've ever seen before, certainly in this division. But on that day, we absolutely outsmarted them by having that extra experience.
And it's a good example of a team that functions well in the Championship. They've got that innovative style with the centre-backs pushing forward, but they also do the basics very well. A little bit like Cardiff the season before. They're not the best team to watch, but it's a Neil Warnock team that just knows what to do in the Championship to win games.
They're both almost quite old-fashioned teams. Like you get sort of 90s throwback teams where the way they get forward, they're not too worried about defending. I've watched a bit of German football over the last few years, and that always reminds you of sort of football we used to watch when we were growing up, because they're not that bothered about defending. They haven't got into that sort of that boring sort of Alan Hansen analyse every single bit where you have to. This is his fault. This is that guy's fault. They just go for it a little bit, and it's paid off for them and Norwich this year. It's really paid dividends for them.
And it's interesting. You look at the players that Sheffield United have. They've got 3 ex-Forest players, Billy Sharp, David McGoldrick up front, deemed not good enough for Forest, he's just won promotion, and Kieran Dowell, who Karanka was quick to jettison last season. He's at Sheffield
And if
United
I
and
think
playing.
if you want to go back
well.
long enough, Kieran Freeman as well.
But
Freeman, yeah.
looking at their squad at the beginning of the season, you wouldn't have said any of maybe apart from Billy Sharp, you'd never have said, yeah, I'd have them in our squad. They're better than our squad.
No.
But Billy Sharp's the only one that we've lost and we've always sort of regretted down the years.
But also, how many of the many managers that we've had at the City Ground since Billy Sharp has gone would we have said would have got the best out of Billy Sharp? Let him be that sort of fox in the box that he is one of the best in the game at doing that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll leave it there for right now. Let's go over to Jeremy Davies with the final Forest Ramble sketch of the season.
The Forest Ramble Sketch by Jeremy Davies. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride could be a good way to sum up Nottingham Forest season, as the club has spent 9 months flirting coquettishly with the top 6 without ever quite breaking into it. There was a time when it seemed that a stylish, seductive Spaniard would lead us over the threshold into the promised land of the playoff zone, but he jilted us halfway down the aisle. In fact, if we follow the metaphor to its logical conclusion, then the top 2 would be the bride and groom, consummating their relationship at the climax of the season with automatic promotion and cutting the cake of financial reward, giving themselves by far the largest slice, with the bridesmaids and the playoff places each getting a piece and the rest of the congregation fighting over the leftover crumbs. In this analogy, Forest is more like the one that got left out of the bridesmaids' party, invited just to the reception, where she spends the evening getting pissed on Southern comfort before grabbing the microphone and belting out "I Will Survive" over the first dance, and falling into the arms of 2 old Irish flames who promised to lead her all the way, only for it all to fizzle out into anticlimax, in our case at home to Blackburn, and rugby tackling the head bridesmaid in a vain attempt to hijack the bridal bouquet. Speaking of survival brings us to the sobering tale of our final opponents of the season, Bolton Wanderers, a club that did indeed scale the dizzy heights of the Premier League, only for it all to end in a bitter and acrimonious divorce from their sugar daddy, and a sad, unedifying spectacle of industrial relations gone wrong, which only serves to highlight the massively uneven distribution of wealth in modern football. Forest defence had better be on their mettle, mind, with Bolton looking likely to deploy what must be a first, even for such a tactically advanced league as the Championship, by fielding 11 strikers, with 3 more on the bench. After the season's controversies, at least we won't need VAR to determine whether Forest can get the ball over the picket line. Enjoy the summer, everyone.
Thanks, Jeremy, for your contributions throughout the season. We are still talking about the season just gone. I got a quick question which could have a not-so-quick answer, but I'd like you to keep it brief if possible. To everyone, would we have gone up if Aitor Karanka had stayed the manager?
I think if he'd stayed and not had a bit of a breakdown, yeah, I think I was confident we would have got into the playoffs. If you look at how close we are to the playoffs, it's just, you look back at the time when he was going through this sort of difficult period of his, and the games we had, Reading away the day after he walked out, Millwall away just before he went away. There was 6 points for taking there, and that would have just left us 2 points off the playoffs. And he's really let us down. I feel like he'd let us down because he sort of committed to taking us up, and he should have seen the job through. He was highly paid, and when you're that highly paid, you've got a responsibility to see your job through, and I don't think he did that.
I think it. Personally, I'd take the pay out of the equation. I think it's a matter of pride in what you're doing, and the pride for him seemed to be about him personally as much as the team. And the interviews he's given that were quoted in the Evening Post, where he's saying, "I did it for the fans and for the players." Well, actually, using the argument you just used, which I have some sympathy with, actually kind of let us down, because in that period over December, when he had his post-Ipswich wobble, and then that lasted for a good old month before he eventually walked away, actually we didn't get as many points as we probably should have done. Stephen, would we have gone up or at least made the playoffs if Karanka had stayed as manager?
We'd have made the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Given the January window, given the absence of this little meltdown, if you want to call it that, He would have addressed the issues in the squad in January. I'm pretty confident of that. Maybe a couple more defenders to cover for the injuries to Figueiredo and Dawson, which definitely hurt us. I think we would have got over the line and got into the playoffs at the very least. But it comes back to Karanka for me, and he spent £25 million on the squad and walked away when times were hard. And I do feel let down by him.
Don't you mean £56 million,
Oh,
Tony?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we share a sense of disappointment there again about how things didn't go the way they could have done.
We weren't good enough to make it to the playoffs, but being 8 points off the playoffs is a bit worse than I would have expected.
Does it temper it slightly that 6 of those points are directly attributable to refereeing decisions?
Slightly.
In a way that hasn't evened out over the season?
Slightly, yes. But I would say probably 2 points off the playoffs would be an accurate representation of where we should be.
So with that opinion of actually, with the refereeing decisions that cost us, which, if we need reminding, Leeds, Kamar Roof, West Brom, Dwight Gale, and the Preston match, the disputed goal there, I'm not including the Ipswich match because that was just before half-time and we can't say that it would have affected the result, okay? But 6 points that have cost us there and would have meant that we were still, actually wouldn't have been the last match of the season with nothing to play for. It would have meant that there was still a level of interest. Stephen, you've made your views abundantly clear about referees over the season. We saw something interesting just over the weekend. Tom Lawrence of Derby County going down really rather easily, and there's this whole debate about, in real time, look, the defender caught his foot and therefore it's, but then you look at it in slow motion, you just think he's going down regardless of whether there's any contact or not. Is it just that the referees have too hard a job to do, or is there actually an issue with standards?
I think there's an issue with standards. I really do. The inconsistencies in this league are incredible. You look at Jack Colback at Sheffield United was booked for diving, which he probably did dive, but was that any worse than what Tom Lawrence did for Derby on the weekend? He probably should have been booked for simulation or...
Maradona Of The Midlands.
I'm loath to criticise referees because it's really difficult because they don't do it on purpose. And I, for one, am more sort of critical of the players who cheated. So Dwight Gale...
Okay, so let's... And you've said that before, okay? Yeah. So if we go back to the fact that Joe Lolly, in that very same West Brom match, well, we should have had a penalty because his shirt was being pulled off his back, and the ref says, no, there wasn't enough there to give a penalty. There's that perennial issue, isn't there? It's like if you don't go down, you don't get the decisions.
Yeah, but the ones Dwight Gale, there was no contact, and Kemar Roof, you just don't handball it like that. You just don't do that. You never. Maradona did it, and he's been vilified ever since, 30 years on. So I just.
Maybe we should have kicked up a fuss like the Aston Villa players did when their player was on the deck
the
other week and practically caused a riot before Leeds put the ball in the net and made it 1-1. Maybe we should have took a leaf out of their book. But, not that I'm bitter or anything.
Well, okay, but that's an interesting one because while we're on this topic of referees, okay, actually the referee there in that Villa-Leeds match played it absolutely by the book. Player goes down. Unless it's a head injury, he has no obligation to stop the match. Now, in this instance, what I only realised second time watching it was the fact that Tyler Roberts actually paused, made to put the ball out of play, and then played it through to Cleek, who went on and scored, which obviously started a riot there. So, the ref did the right thing, didn't he? And then it's down to the managers, and Bielsa, fair enough, fair play to him, said, give the goal. And then even then, Pontus Jansson almost didn't. To me, the thing that was also outrageous, for Bielsa, he can't control what the players are doing. He might say to them, put the ball out, and he might say, give the goal, but he can't do anything about the fact that Tyler Roberts and Cleek play on, and he can't do anything about the fact that Jansson tries to do a tackle in that moment. He can just shout. But he made the decision, give the goal back.
I think there was an incident earlier in the game where the Villa players put the ball out for a Leeds player who was on the floor.
Yeah.
But, I'm of the opinion you play to the whistle.
But we're talking about the referee.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, of course, the thing that the referee got wrong there, and in fairness, I don't blame him for this because he couldn't see everything. I mean, Patrick Bamford, if we need to remind ourselves, used to be on the books at Forest, okay? And that was absolutely... And I was saying he needs to get a 4-game ban at least for that, because that is... but, of course, the correct ban is the same one as Dwight Gale got, which is successful deception of a match official, which is a 2-game ban. So that's not the referee's fault. It goes back to what you were saying, Maradona Of The Midlands. It's just the players.
Yeah, it's just that comes down to your own personal pride and your own morals. If you've got... I mean, that sort of manliness has gone out of the game where... When we were growing up and watching football and players like Stuart Pearce and Vinnie Jones and whoever, and it was a matter of pride that you didn't go down, you didn't show pain when you were tackled, even when you were hurt, you tried to carry on. And it's a complete opposite now. There's where there's the cynicism and the professionalism, for want of a better word, has come into it, where you just have to get an advantage from every single bit of play and the sort of the idea of sportsmanship and
as a side issue. You know, having played in 5-a-side leagues, you see that coming through. You know, you see kids coming through and thinking that's normal and okay to do. So, you know, and people who I know who've done refereeing at lower levels say it absolutely permeates down, and they have to deal with all kinds of bad language and problems and lack of discipline because that's what people see their heroes doing.
Yeah. I mean, referees do have a difficult job. It's not easy, and the speed at which the game is played, things can be missed. I'm not denying that, but we're talking here about this idea of players feigning injury, simulation, all that, and it's becoming a real problem. So the referees have to be switched on to that, and I think they just have to be more consistent in how they apply the laws of the game, because that's the only way you're going to stamp it out. The only way you're going to stamp out diving and play acting and everything else like that. You've got to really come down hard on it. It comes down to the referees. It also comes down to the FA. If they have to implement retrospective bans, they've got to be punishment enough to deter players from doing it. Otherwise, you're going to have teams like Forest whose seasons are being affected by poor decision making, and really it shouldn't be coming down to the refs.
So 2 things that I would say there. One is that it does go back to the issue that I sort of have mentioned before, which is most seasons you do say, well, it evens out. But this season, it very much didn't. Now, in the end, looking at the points total, it hasn't affected whether Forest go up or have a chance of going up or not. But it does mean that we're in a significantly worse position than we might have been otherwise. And those are points we already lost. So you can ban Dwight Gale, but it doesn't mean that we get the points that we should have had, which would have, and with that and the Preston one, that would have hypothetically made the difference between having, like, not getting consecutive wins to having 3 or 4 in a row. So there's an issue there. I would also say that thing you're saying about stamping down on things, every time there's a World Cup, we see there's a new directive, and last year it was basically, you know, the grappling and tugging in the box, and England were, you know, beneficiaries of that, because England got a couple of penalties during the World Cup, and there were many more that were given that just wouldn't have been given, certainly not in the Premier League or Football League the year before. So is it really that difficult?
Is it difficult to implement?
Yeah, I mean, we see it done in a World Cup, is it? So
I don't think so, no.
So shouldn't it be just a ruling saying, you know what, if you can see someone holding someone else's shirt, then you give the foul against them?
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you. Yeah, I think it's just never happened, and it's going to take a cultural shift by the referees just to sort of see, yeah, well, that is a foul. And there's always the argument that if we do that, you're going to have 7 penalties in a game, and you're going to have such a...
So,
yeah, give 7 penalties a game and see what stops to it.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, if Lewis Grabban has taken them, we're going to miss 6 of them anyway. So, and I don't know if you all saw, but in the Plymouth match, and this could have affected the teams that stay up or go down. There's a very similar incident. The goalkeeper went to throw the ball out. player intercepted it, put it into the unguarded net, and they didn't give. This time, the opposition didn't give the goal back. There is a real issue of sportsmanship in the professional game, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
Right. Anyway,
Remember Michael Branch.
well, actually, I was hoping not to go back there, but we were at that match, weren't we?
Yeah,
And
but I can't remember what he did now. I'm so old.
well, I think you blocked it out of your mind. So the first thing about that match was Adi Akinbaye headbutted Tony Vaughan, so the ref sent both of them off, even as Tony Vaughan had blood pouring down his face. And that was after 5 minutes. And then it was exactly the same thing. So Dave Besant went to play the ball out because a Wolves player was down. Branch intercepted it, put it into the unguarded net. And the thing that's interesting about that is I remember in the post-match interview, David Platt saying that the Wolves bench were discussing whether to give a goal back and they decided not to. And that's why I say fair play to Bielsa. I've got a lot of respect for Bielsa because if nothing else, I just think that it's amazing that he's in the English game, and it's even better that he's in the Championship because he's just a football genius. But also, people sort of say, "Oh, Spygate, this, that, and the other," and about him being, really kind of a bit hard and a bit kind of unconventional. But in that moment, he showed me that he's someone who's got the goodness of the game in his heart, and we need to see more of that. And certainly Michael Branch didn't. So, which areas of the team need strengthening?
Ideally, we need one player who can sort of control the ball, pass it, run with it, drive.
Will that be Colback?
No, it won't be Colback. No.
Will he be here next season?
I'm not sure. I'm probably in a camp of one here where I wouldn't be too disheartened if he didn't come back.
No, that's two. I think as much as I like him and as much as I think he's brilliant because he's been, everyone's been saying he's been an 8 out of 10 most matches he's played. But for 15 yellow cards and for the influence he has in terms of affecting results, you know what? I'd probably rather see a Jakob who's got a little bit more bites there paired with, a Gediora type player.
Yeah, I was going to say we've got 3 or 4 players who can play that similar sort of role. So, I think ideally, the squad next season, I'm thinking quality more than quantity. So ideally, I'd like to prune a couple of those sort of similar players. So if that happens to be Colback, so be it. Because
it's the obvious one in terms of he's not under contract. Yeah. Secondly, he'd be on the biggest money in the entire squad.
And also, if we can get him on a free transfer, it's not going to happen because Mike Ashley's not going to let him go on a free transfer. But if we could get him on a free transfer and on reasonable wages, he'd be a brilliant signing.
Those are two big ifs, though.
But we're not going to. If we end up paying $4.5 million for him and he's still on 40 grand a week, then I don't think the money is better spent on a more creative player.
Okay, Stephen, where do you think the team needs strengthening?
For me, it's an attack, and I would like another striker brought in, somebody who is perhaps second in line to Graben, to more or less replace Murphy.
Let me just stop you there and let's hear, because Baz had very similar thoughts.
I have a suspicion Graben's going to go. I don't think he's been the same since his injury anyway.
It's very, very easy to say, but people who've watched the Sunderland documentary would say that the Graben that we've seen in the second half of this season is very similar to the Graben who flounced out of Sunderland because he's a striker and he needs to feel loved. And as you know, that's something that, in a way, I kind of like in strikers. Yeah. But
of all the managers, you'd say Martin O'Neill would be one that would be able to do that. I think part of it is because Carvalho's not been played. Graben needs Carvalho.
Yeah,
he needs what Graben seems to thrive on are through balls to run onto, and he's not going to get that when we're lumping it up from the back.
Should Graben be that number one striker?
I think he should be. I think he's the best striker in the club, and his all-round game suits the Forest players and the way that we play. In that he's mobile, he's got a decent enough turn of pace.
But in line of what we've just said, is he not just a bit too mardy?
No, I just think not for that reason, but we do need another striker to provide competition for him.
Do we like Kareem?
I think he's too lightweight. I think if by some miracle we become this total football
I think if we play 3-5-2 or 3-3-5-1-1 or whatever it is.
I was going to say, if we become like a really creative team that's creating sort of 10 chances every game, and we've got plenty of players going forward, then I think he'd thrive in our.
And actually, that's the thing, that system, I called it 3-5-2, 3-5-1-1. Actually, it's more of a sort of a 3-4-2-1, isn't it? Because you've got Carvalho and Lolly kind of in the floating positions. And that is something that I think Karim can work quite well with. And when he came on as a sub in the whole match, that's where that extra mobility that he has and so on. Plus, I think he's done well to get himself in some good goal scoring positions, even though he's only got a couple of goals this season.
And the other thing we have to remember at Graben is he's got this ongoing Achilles issue, which I don't think he's ever going to solve now. So
Graben's what, 30, 31 years old, is he?
He's about 31.
Yeah, so it's not going to go away, is it?
No, so we need backup for that. And the startling fact I heard yesterday was that he's only scored 2 goals since the beginning of December. So that's really cost us in the second half of the season.
Probably wasn't a penalty.
No. I think he scored 1 against Rotherham and 1 somewhere else.
I mean, what's his goals to games ratio like? Because obviously he has missed a lot of games.
I don't know. I'm not good at him.
Yeah. So, is it satisfactory?
He's made a fair amount of appearances. I think he's still made about 19 appearances since the beginning of December, but he just hasn't scored as many goals. And he hasn't looked like scoring many goals, to be fair. He's just not looked at the same player. I think that issue with his Achilles, it's just taken... You need that competitive advantage when you're a striker, just to be that split second quicker than the defender. And I think he's lost that slightly. Hopefully a good rest over the summer will bring...
And that's what was said, wasn't it? Is that the only thing you can do in the Achilles injury, because of the anatomical and physiological factors... blood flow and all of that. So the only thing you can do is rest an Achilles, and the only way he can do that is either by not being in the team or resting it in the off season. So that's going to be. I mean, do we still think at £6 million that could be the investment that gets us over the line? Okay, not this season so far, but maybe next season.
Possibly. He's proven he can find the back of the net reasonably consistently. I know he's had the run of late where it's not been too good, but there might have been,
but he's not had a consistent run of games even amongst those appearances, has he?
No. There's been some sub appearances and he's gone off a lot. But I mean, I think the bottom line is we need another striker in the club. I think Daryl Murphy, he's getting even older. He must be, I don't know, 35 now, and when he's played. He's been inconsistent, which is what you get when you're 35. You're brilliant one week. You think back to the Leeds game.
I think that's probably what Murph's like
in
his career.
Where we think back to the Leeds game where it was an absolute immense performance and he just sort of really, really played well. And then, understandably, Roy Keane and Martin O'Neill knew him from Ireland, and so they were willing to back him when they came in. And he just didn't play that well. He just hasn't held it up as well and linked up play and scored as many goals. So I think we do need another striker in the club.
We can't rely on Graben. We need somebody who's going to take that goal scoring burden.
Do you think
away
Karim
from him.
could do a good job?
I think as a third choice striker, yes. Maybe even in a 2, he could work as being that slightly more mobile option. So yes, I think he's a good option to have in the squad, but I don't think I think we need somebody who's got a little bit more. He might be a little bit more prolific. Who knows? I mean, Karim might be that option. We've not seen enough of him.
But even then, we'd need to have another forward, wouldn't we? Okay, so...
and just on that as well, in terms of attacking positions, I would also say we would need a few more bodies in the wide positions. So we've had Diaz here, we've had Gonçalves, who can't seem to get a game. So I imagine his future at Forest looks like it might be coming... Looks like he might be pretty short now. He might be gone in the summer. So, yeah, I think we need a bit more quality out wide as well and more options out
That's
wide.
the point I was going to make as well. We don't actually, for all the wide players we've got, we don't actually get any crosses into the box. I can't think of anywhere we've sort of hit the bar. I mean, you don't see that full stop in modern day football too much anyway.
Yeah, and I think...
But with this player like Graben and even Murphy... in the team, we're missing a trick there by not getting some good crosses into the
But is that a problem that gets addressed slightly by, if we go for the sort of the 3 at the back, allowing your Osbornes and your Byrams, who do have good crosses on them, to motor forward and
a little bit.
contribute.
But still, I mean, if we can get some real quality on the wing, somebody with pace and the ability. I mean, every club's looking for that player, but with pace and the ability to deliver a quality cross, we should try and get it. But I mean, the problem we've had with Ben Osborne down the years is that he's good, but he's not great. So
yeah, he's consistent.
Yeah,
but he's got a level, hasn't he?
I mean, that's why the
same with Matty Cash, I'd say.
Yeah, it's both of them. That the wing back position probably suits them because they're not quite good enough to be out and out attacking wingers. They're not quite good enough at defending to be out and out fullbacks. But the wing back position just makes best use of their.
Although Matty Cash has played the last couple of matches in centre mid, which of course is where he first played when he first got into the first team, way back under Philippe Montagnier. So maybe there's something there about him being a bit of a fetcher and a carrier.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. So from the front all the way to the back, Pantilemon's still your number one?
Yes, for me. I don't see, unless a really outstanding option becomes available, I don't think there's a need to change the goalkeeper. And
yeah, I think that for me that would be sort of the cherry on the icing on the cake. If we've got sorted all the other positions out, and then we can get hold of a really good goalkeeper, I think we can improve on Pantilimon, but he's not a priority at this stage.
I think he's good enough, and as we've discussed many times before, he's a confidence man. What about Steele as number 2?
I think he's been solid enough as number 2. I know he's made a couple of errors, but if he's a number 2, he's not going to be relied on to play week in, week out. So I think he's okay as he is.
Jordan Smith?
Well, Jordan Smith's number 2 at Mansfield recently as well. He can't even get a game there. He's gone back onto the bench at Mansfield. So I don't know if he's really ready to be a number 2 in the Championship. We all agreed that it was good for him to move on from Forest for a season and get some regular football, because being thrown into the position he was, granted he performed admirably, and we'd never forget that save against Ipswich, but maybe he's third at best at the moment. He needs a bit more development.
Having said that, I think, bearing in mind the stuff that people talk about sweeper keepers and stuff, and there's always that thing of he's not good enough with the, he struggles a bit with the ball at his feet. That'll depend upon the footballing philosophy that Martin O'Neill actually implements. And then at the back, we've got many players, but not many who can seem to last a season. So we've got Benaloan, we've got Milosevic, we've got Figueiredo, who was very pleased to see him back in the squad yesterday. We've got Dawson, we've got Heffler. As we've discussed with Baz, Dawson and Heffler, they just aren't going to play enough games. So we've got a problem there. But I'd be perfectly happy to see Toby Figueiredo being at the heart of Forest defence next season. I personally think that guy's class.
And Joe Worrell's coming back as well.
Well, I didn't mention him for a reason, and of course it's because he's been out there. Now, this is what Baz has to say.
I'm not convinced, I could see, given the size of our squad and the number of loan players we've got returning, which again they mentioned on Radio Nottingham today, it's a significant number of players coming back when we've already got quite a large squad here. I could see Joe Worrell actually being farmed out again.
Now, we have got an issue, which is that Heffler's under contract. We've got an issue in that Dawson's under contract. We've got an issue in that Benaloan and Milosevic are under contract. So we've got a lot of players.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems obvious that we'll let Wage go, even though Martin O'Neill seems to like him. Just due to the sheer number of centre-halves we've got, he's going to have to go. And that leaves, ideally, we'd prune one more player. I mean, if you're looking at it coldly and logically, you look at Dawson, take out the Forest history, and look at him, so he's going to be 36 this season. He hasn't, a hamstring injury, he's kept him out since the beginning of December. You'd say maybe one or two. If it was any other player, you'd maybe talk to him and say, Michael, is it time you called it a day and opened up a slot? Shall we come to some sort of agreement? But because it's Michael Dawson and because of the influence and just for how well he plays when he can come in.
I was going to say, because when he's played, he's been outstanding.
Yeah.
And he's been someone who's been worthy of having the captain's armband as well. And we're still missing that little bit of leadership, aren't we?
Yeah, and then so that leaves Heffler.
Again, as we say, another player who's missed more games than he's played in the last 2-3 years of his career.
And then, the sort of curveball there is Milosevic, who we got in a free transfer and is probably a sellable asset He's got that European experience. I could see him being one of the players who goes on the Monaco Olympiacos merry-go-round, and we might get a transfer fee for him. And then the other one is obviously the next sellable asset is Joe Worrell, but although I don't know if we'd get as much money as we were maybe talking of 2 years ago. So
now, and as I would say, is that Martin seems to have a little bit more faith in youth than Karanka did. So I can see a defence of maybe, I don't know, Ben Lawan, Worrell and Figueiredo perhaps next season, because Ben Lawan to add that real sort of, fighter, instinct, and then Figueiredo and Worrell to add that little bit of sort of class and the ability to kind of use the ball as well.
And it's interesting you mentioned that three at the back again, because if we're bringing Worrell back in as an example, he's not going to be as exposed in a back three. He's going to have that experience of Figueiredo, and he's going to have Ben Lawan, let's say, alongside him, or even Milosevic if he does stay at the club. So yes, that might be a good way of introducing Worrell back into the team if O'Neill feels that he's good enough.
And I would actually also point out that Alex Milosevic, I get what you're saying, mainly because, to me, he's been one of the most consistent performers in a red shirt.
I wouldn't want to see him go, but just to balance the books, and just because he's somebody other clubs might want to buy, and because we would be able to attract.
And he is that good.
Yeah. It would make
he
sense.
totally hasn't put a foot wrong at all in a red shirt, which makes his absence from the team a little bit mystifying. But obviously, there's things that we may not know that are going on. So if we move from there, full back. Right back, we've got Tendai Doriqua, and then we've had the two lone right backs, Byram and Yanko. I would have thought Byram would be the one of the loanees is possibly most likely for Forest to try and get.
Again, similarly, Colback, if we could, just due to his injury record, I wouldn't want to pay a transfer fee for him. If we can get him on a free transfer, or maybe £250,000, something like that, yeah, definitely go for it. But he just played so little football down the past 3 years. I
don't know much about his injury record before he came to Forest, but obviously the one that he had at Forest was a bit of a freak, a freak injury.
He had knee injury at West Ham as well, and you just wouldn't want to risk money.
Which is a shame, because when he plays, I think you can see that he's a class above.
And he's going to be on Premier League wage as well. That's the other stumbling block as well.
And so, by the way, in that back three, I totally forgot about Jack Robinson, which is a bit unfair of me, because I can see him being the left-sided centre-half in the back three, and doing a decent job there. But he's also a left-back. Osborne, I suppose, if we do play a back three, would be another contender for left wing-back, as he has been playing. Matty Cash, potentially a wing-back, as we've discussed. And then we've talked about the middle of the park. So, with that in mind, which kinds of players would you see leaving the club? I mean, we've got a surfeit of central midfielders.
Yeah, I forgot about Bridcut as well. He's still knocking around.
Yeah. I think we can safely say it's not really worked out for him at Forest, has it?
So, I mean, in an ideal world, we maybe let Bridcut and Watson go. Mm-hmm. I know Jamie Ward's come to the end of his contract, so he's going to go. Henderson, the goalkeeper, is going to go.
You've got Zach Clough, who I think is still got 2 years to go on his contract. Yeah. So it might be a case of just keep loaning him out. Yeah. Well, he signed a 5-year deal, didn't he?
I think he's hardly played even at where was he?
Rochdale.
Yeah, I don't think he's.
But Rochdale were happy to take him on loan again, because the first time he was suffering from injury. Yeah. So it depends upon whether that's down to fitness or whether it's down to ability. I mean, we know he's got ability, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. And then looking down the squad list, Pele came in on loan. I don't think he's done enough for me. I mean, I can see why they brought him in, because on paper he's that big presence in central midfield who can control the ball, pass it around and provide some drive. But he just hasn't done it for me. Goncalves is going to go. Diaz obviously already went,
which I think was quite cunning, really. Yeah, the way that sort of they got him to free up that space in the squad.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real shame, because
I thought he was a good player. He just
didn't. I don't know. Just maybe criticise Karanka for not making best use of it.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then Bonattini's going as well. I can't see him coming back. He's hardly played. So I think it more than anything, it's a pruning job.
Yep.
And then just getting a bit of quality in central midfield. And
Okay. Can you see Forest cancelling some contracts?
maybe. I mean,
Or selling them to Olympiacos.
Yeah.
Zach Clough going to Olympiacos.
it's down to the players if they want to sort of get on with their careers. It's just, I mean, we'll be playing them good money. It'd be difficult. None of those players are going to get a championship move.
And what you'd hope is that where Forest need to learn from the excesses of the past is in terms of awarding contracts. We saw that so many times under the previous owner, that players were given long contracts, and Zach Clough is an example of that. And what's the point? In terms of returning loanees as well, okay, George Grant, do we think he's got a future at Forest?
No.
Okay, Tyler Walker?
No.
Can Forest get at least the playoffs, hopefully promoted under Martin O'Neill, Maradona Of The Midlands?
It very much depends on if we can get the right sort of players in, but we do need to get playoffs, it's not such a huge stretch. Automatic, we're talking about another 24 points or so that we'll need, another 20 goals we need to find from somewhere. So it really depends on who we sign in the summer. It's more almost as much as who we get. It's a change in mindset from playing fearful football, hold what you have football, to having a more attacking emphasis and just going out for wins and trying to score more goals and just letting the defence get on with their job and putting some more attacking players in central midfield. If we can do that, yes, we can.
Stephen?
Yes, we can. We can do it under O'Neill. He's in the job now. He's been in the job for a couple of months alongside Roy Keane, so you're going to have a bit of continuity going into the summer. Give him the opportunity to ship out a couple of players and hopefully bring in some quality that really enhances what we've got in the squad already. There've been some encouraging signs, some encouraging performances under him, so more of that next season. Yeah, there's every chance we can go top six.
So, as ever, we're imbued of the end-of-season optimism, the hope for the next season, and thank you very much for your contributions over the season to Baz, to Stephen, to Maradona Of The Midlands, and to Jeremy. We'll be hopefully back next season. Have a great summer.